we go everyone, I have brought it upon myself. I intend to review all the Psycho films, excluding the film called Bates Motel, which was like a TV movie that came out in the 80s, but one of these films happens to be a TV movie, but I have thrown that one to the side. It doesn't star Anthony Perkins, and it's just one less bad film to watch. I'm guessing it's pretty bad. Well, who knows. But I have heard many bad things about the later Psycho films, including the remake. More on that later. But let's have a look at the 5 Psycho films, Psycho 1 to 4, and the remake. And the place I would like to start is in the late 1950s, whenever Alfred Hitchcock decided to adapt Robert Bloch's novel of the same name. Interestingly, the novel was written around the same time as the real-life case of Ed Gein. He was arrested in 1957 in Wisconsin for the murder of 2 women. In his home was clothing made out of human skin and body parts. Gein would claim to a psychiatrist he was trying to make a woman suit so he could pretend to be his dead mother. However, Bloch was not aware of this case when writing the novel, and later was shocked to see how close it resembled the real-life case. It also makes me think this murder might have inspired The Silence of the Lambs, a novel written in 1988, and later, of course, a movie. So much has been said about the original film, so I'll just keep things fairly brief. Psycho is absolutely one of my favourite films. I remember going into it not knowing very much about the plot, and it just blew me away. You know, when you don't know, even when you do know the twist and what happens at the end and everything, it's still a great experience, but that absolute surprise, I still think it was an extremely shocking experience, you know. Even when I watched it at 16, I had seen many violent films and things like that, but it just did something else. And I still think it's very bold, because the idea of the killing off the main character halfway through the film, like, that's never really done in films. Now, I can't actually name any films that actually happens, and I think it's a really audacious move by Hitchcock, especially in, you know, a classic kind of Hollywood period. Definitely, I mean, you can see why he battled censors to get that film made. I mean, there's a lot of things in it that wasn't actually done very frequently in cinema at that point. Only someone of Hitchcock's status and talent could have made this film, even with much of his own money going into it. The result is a true work from Hitchcock, where he controls every element of the film. He ultimately controls the audience, using the camera to either hide information or give us the privilege of information. One of the reasons the film works so well is just how Hitchcock has composed every single shot. The use of close-ups and tracking shots help create the atmosphere of suspense and fear. Then, of course, the brilliant editing and music score add to the sense of panic and thrill. The shower scene is unforgettable as a piece of impressive editing that echoes the ways of Soviet montage of the silent era. Another reason Psycho works so well is because of the groundbreaking performance from young Anthony Perkins. Norman Bates is clearly one of cinema's most complex characters, and Perkins encapsulates the psyche of him through his body language, gestures, speech, and even eye movement. He brings to the character an extended adolescence, a man who hasn't mentally matured, who faces a series of complexes. There's been so many interpretations and writings done on Psycho, striking from film aesthetics to psychoanalytic theory, and it is worth digging into. There's several books on Hitchcock's career, and there's just a few dedicated to talking about Psycho. I read a very good one called The Moment of Psycho, which was a fantastic book, just really analysing and looking at how the film got made, you know, the pre-production process, the production process, and then the reaction to the film. It was a great book. Definitely seek it out if you're a fan. Hitchcock fought with censors to get this film made and released, and the result is one of the greatest pieces of cinema we've ever seen. So 20 years pass and we haven't seen a Psycho sequel yet, and Hitchcock has just died recently. Then Psycho 2 comes along, directed by Richard Franklin. Now, I've known about the sequels for quite a few years, though I hadn't heard of it until maybe 2 years after seeing the first Psycho film, and my first reaction, of course, was, no, they can't do this to a classic, please don't try and add to the story. So I go into the film, and honestly, I was really surprised. I actually enjoyed this film. This is actually a decent film. Psycho manages to be entertaining and somewhat suspenseful, trying to capture the atmosphere of the first film, and I think it does it a good bit of justice. The plot is set 22 years later, where Norman Bates has just been released from his confinement. My Korean sister Lila protests against this, having even got a petition signed by 743 people to not release him, but this is put aside. Norman returns to the old motel and given an assigned job at a diner where he makes friends with Mary Samuels, a young waitress. An interesting choice of name considering Mayan Crane had used the name Marie Samuels in the original film when signing the motel register. The film concerns his attempt to readjust, but the presence of his mother returns, and he fears what the consequences may be. I mean, as far as sequels come, especially in the horror genre, you don't expect very much. But this works as a good character study of Norman, and it doesn't use cheap thrills, and honestly, it tries to hold the suspense of the original quite well. Like I said, I'm an absolute purist when it comes to movies, and it really pisses me off when things get rebooted or remade or endless sequels. I mean, now, I don't really hate them that much, but 9 out of 10, they're gonna be bad. I mean, now, this has been proven wrong, because there's The Godfather 2, there's The Fly remake, which I think's brilliant, The Departed, there's lots of great remakes, but remakes and sequels and stuff, but I was very skeptical coming into this one, as I said. One thing I was really pleased with was the casting of the film. I was glad to see Vera Miles playing Lila, staying true to casting. I read that Perkins first turned the idea down behind returning to the role of Bates, but he quickly accepted when the studio considered casting someone else, including Christopher Walken. Now that would have been interesting. Probably bad though. Interestingly, the role of Mary was considered to go to Jamie Lee Curtis, who is actually the real life daughter to Janet Leigh. Something I was thinking is, how did they film in the same location? The house had remained, but the motel had to be recreated. Overall, I think they've definitely done a good job at this, because you did feel like you were just coming back to the same place.
What's the matter?
As you would expect, Anthony Perkins is terrific, and I'm so glad that someone else didn't fill his role, because who else could do it? He is the reason the character is so iconic, and he understands him more than probably any other actor, since he's already been in that character before. Perkins manages to capture the same nature of the character, but you have to consider the fact that 20 years has passed, and now he's well into his 40s, or maybe even 50s, I'm gonna guess. But there is a little bit of a behaviour difference due to just, getting older. And a scene that sticks out for me is when he revisits the house. I mean, you can see him recalling haunting memories of not just what we saw in the first Psycho film, but even before that. But it really is weird that he comes back to that place. It haunts him and tortures him, but he's compelled to go back. However, there's just something missing from the film. I think it is due to the fact the film is in colour. It loses that shadowy and chilling atmosphere as a result. I really think Perkins is what holds the film together. Outside his performance, the acting is solid, but it's nothing too exceptional. I think it's hard to add to a film that became so historical in the history of cinema and iconic of its genre without it being religiously compared to. The film may have some campy moments that are a little more comical than they should be, but it mostly maintains a level of suspense, and it isn't full of mad gore like most horror films started to do in the 80s. Psycho 2 was a pleasant surprise, which is a safe watch for fans of Hitchcock's masterpiece. And now that takes us to the third installment in the series, released in 1986. We continue just a month after the second film, with Bates still running the motel. Talking of the premise of this film kinda does spoil the ending of the second, but I have to say it to describe this film. So towards the end of the second film, we discover an old woman who runs the diner that Norman worked at, called Emma, turns out to be Norman's mother, his real mother. Norman, in anger, kills her, which is actually quite a funny scene for the wrong reasons, and holds onto your corpse just like he did before. Continuing on, the local law enforcement are wondering about Emma's disappearance. Aside this, we have a young ex-nun called Maureen, who comes to stay in the motel long term. We also have greasy musician Dwayne, who ends up working at the motel. From here stems the film, which I won't spoil too much of anymore. Now, like many film series, there is like a gradual dip and decline in the quality of each one as they come out, and I have to say it's quite relevant to this series. The third one's definitely a little bit good than the second. It's still a solid film, and Anthony Perkins actually directed this one, and it still manages to hold some of the spirit of the first film, and of course the second. There's certainly a more comical aspect of the film in a dark way. It plays out more as a straightforward slasher film while still showing us Norman's prolonged internal torment. One of my issues of the film is it's somewhat heavy with its symbolic messages, involving the nun character and a statue later on in the film. I will literally say no more about it, but if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know, it just bugged me and it just rubbed me the wrong way. I just felt it was just too much of a freak accident. Again, Perkins is absolutely the highlight of this movie, but I think the film's problem overall is just being a little bit silly this time. But if you view it as a dark comedy, I suppose it doesn't really matter. Psycho 3 is all around, a pretty fun film to watch, and it's not one I'll revisit, but it's okay. It's okay. It's all downhill from here. I know I talked about it dipping quality, but this just is a blunder. The talk of its plot and the fact the film exists concretes that things aren't quite over for Norman. And I think this film is the straw that breaks the camel's back and shows some narratives should just be left alone. It might tell us something that the film only made it to TV, which isn't to discredit TV movies though, because some are actually quite good. But it definitely shows a decline in marketing because obviously the film couldn't make it theatrically. But anyway, our story is set another few years ahead. We open to a radio show hosted by a woman called Fran, who is discussing the topic of matricide with Dr. Richmond, who had been Norman's former psychologist. Fran doesn't know this yet. Norman decides to call the show using the name Ed and begins to tell the story of his childhood to his teenage years. Oh, and by the way, he's married now.
Oh, I've killed before. And now I'm going to have to do it again.
It is interesting you use the name of Ed, obviously a nod to Ed Gaines, the person I spoke of earlier in this video, a real life person. Now, how do I pinpoint my biggest problem with this film? I'll go through three things that really bother me, and I'll start with saying how much I didn't enjoy the exposition of how much was actually shown of Norman Bates' past. Now, it is an interesting character study to finally show us what it was that turned Norman Bates into what he is, what traumas, the things that happened to him that formed him as a character and a person, to get an idea of his psyche. And I have to say, his mother says some really, really brutal things.
I was fine until I gave birth to you. You caused a lot of damage. I should have gotten rid of you the day I found out I was going to have you. Not one thing you've ever said or done has made all I've gone through with you worthwhile. Not one blessed thing. I should have killed you in my womb. You sure as hell tried to kill me getting out of it.
I don't blame him for being fucked up after hearing stuff like that. I have to say, I've never heard a more brutal line in a film or a TV show being said, from mother to son, ever. I mean, holy shit, that was pretty heavy. Though I do think they made Norma into a much more psychotic and bipolar type of character rather than someone who's just a real control freak and someone who's very selfish. Because some of the scenes did feel a little bit too exaggerated, such as the scene whenever Norma asks Norman to put the lotion on her skin. That wasn't the Silence of the Lambs reference, by the way.
Start at the ankles. Find the pulse.
Now, I can see that scene was really trying to play with, the Freudian ideas that were in the first film, but it just makes me cringe. Now, there were definitely some interesting things during all the flashback storytelling for how Norman ended up being so disturbed. Two scenes that stick out for me that I thought were really well constructed include the picnic scene and when Norman is made to wear women's clothing. The picnic scene I like because they shot it in a very dreamlike fashion and how we might remember our childhood memories as something magical. It's also interesting because this is obviously Norman looking back at his own life. The other scene with Norman being put into a wig and nightie was a result of getting an erection when rolling around with his mother after the already mentioned scene of Norman having to put lotion on his mother. God, it's so disturbing to read that out.
Do you understand me, boy?
Now, the major problem is just how much of his life that we see. I think it really kills the imagination and the enigmatic fascination we would have with Norman in the first film, We have to just kind of guess, I suppose, as to how he got to be. I think it's too heavy-handed in the sense that now, cements that idea. Now, whenever you go revisit the films, you're probably going to be thinking about Psycho 4, the ideas. I don't know. Now, I think there is some excellent execution in some of the scenes. Now, it is interesting in parts, but I think just overall the film has a bad execution. And that's my next problem with the film. Just the overall structure of the film is very messy and it just seems to cut all over the place. This is flashback the movie. The pacing just goes between the phone calls and the flashbacks, and there's just, I don't know, I just had a pacing problem. I mean, I don't think there really is much you could assist with the narrative in terms of where it wanted to go, because it really is him just retelling the memories. But so in that respect, anytime when we're told the stories, it's through Norman's perspective because it's him telling the story. So anytime it's from his point of view, and you can almost say we couldn't take everything he says for granted considering his mental state. Things might be more exaggerated and heightened in his mind. So I guess that's one thing that's interesting with all the flashbacks. That's one element that I think is quite clever. So that's one thing rewarding about the film, I suppose. But overall, I think it just kind of overloads all the scenes of showing Norman's childhood, because it really is like all over the place in terms of showing us his childhood and teenhood. Now, as I said, Norman is married and his wife is at work, soon to come home during his phone call. She was a nurse at the mental institute he was committed to after the third film. You know, after killing more people. This is where my big problem comes in, that I also mentioned he has a baby on the way. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that someone would marry or be in an intimate relationship with someone like Norman. I mean, this is a man who, you know, killed some people, including his mother, and held onto the body for a good 10 years. Got arrested, went to a mental institution, got released, killed some more people. And this is someone that worked at the mental institution, so like, why would you even trust this person? Now, I understand even in the most extreme way, let's say you forgave him, you know, because of his mental state, you know, you do have some sort of sympathy because it's Norman Bates and he's just this broken, fragile character, but at the end of the day, look what he fucking did. I mean, it's just silly. I mean, I don't even care if something like this has happened in real life. It just doesn't work at all in the film. It's just silly. Aside that major issue, Perkins was good as usual, and Warren Frost as the radio host also did a good job. You can see it's meant to be a real thriller, but I think it's just bad execution. You can see it is meant to be a killing thriller, but I think it just has very bad execution. Some of the ideas it brings to the table were interesting to watch, but the structure and silliness stop it doing what it intended. I think Psycho 4 proves we got too many Psycho films. But wait, there's more. Alright, here it is. This is the one that you've all probably been waiting for, and you know, I really was dreading this one. I mean, they weren't joking with the shot-to-shot shit, but it was even worse than I imagined. Let me collectively try to tell you why it's a big mistake and absolute disaster. Well, you already know the promise, and for the big fans of the Psycho film, you'll know exactly what shots are coming next, and how they're going to look. Because the film does almost everything in the exact same way. Right down to camera movement, framing and timing. The script barely changed either.
First time I ever saw the customer high-pressure the salesman.
It's the first time the customer ever high-pressured the salesman.
It's stuffy in here. Boy, it's stuffy in here.
People always call a madhouse someplace, don't they?
People always call a madhouse someplace, don't they?
Gus Van Sant said he made the film as an experiment to prove that you can't make a shot-for-shot remake of a film. Gus Van Sant, are you fucking 6 years old, or are you like a high school filmmaker? Because you should know, as a filmmaker, I mean, even I know that you can't remake a film shot for shot. Why would you even do it? That's just like an excuse to make a bad film or something. That's like, oh yeah, I made Sharknado just, you know, because it was a fucking, I just wanted to make a shit movie. I wanted to make it with loads of plot holes and silly CGI. Sorry, I almost went off on a tangent there. But seriously, he just shouldn't have made this film. A terrible decision. He's not a bad director. I mean, he isn't a bad director, but what the fuck was he thinking with this film? Let's take a look at the casting of Vince Vaughn, which pissed me off. Just look at him. I mean, what made Anthony Perkins work so well as Norman Bates was his boyish presence, his bony, lanky physicality, his soft voice, and boyish expression, even down to his little gestures of speech inflections and body movement. Both physically and mentally, it felt like he was still a boy in some ways. Then we have Vince Vaughn, who looks much older and more muscular, and overall, his performance isn't like absolutely atrocious, but he definitely was miscast. Furthermore, the reason you can't remake a film like Psycho is because of how cemented in culture it is. I mean, it's Psycho, it's one of the most important and influential films of all time. People that haven't even seen the film have heard the theme tune, or they understand it's something to do with someone getting killed in a shower. The character of Norman Bates is still considered one of the most complex and fascinating characters in cinema, you know, and Anthony Perkins' performance is one of the greatest in all of cinema, and he really cements who Norman Bates is. He's the reason that we love him so much. The same way that Bela Lugosi came to define Dracula and Boris Karloff with Frankenstein. You can't remake a masterwork like Psycho. Also, why did they include this scene? Why? What, was the idea of no one spying and having some sort of voyeuristic pleasure from it not enough? I mean, seriously, no fucking subtlety at all. And wait, there's more that pissed me off. Take a look at this clip. The shower scene. Oh look, a random bit of stock footage. Why? This happens again. The famous stair scene. Just threw in some stock footage. Why? Why would you add stock footage like that? Why? I don't even think you could say it's pretentious. I think it's just something of its own. Why would you add stock footage like that to a scene like that? It doesn't work in any level. Also, another major issue for me was the sound design. Now, I literally thought there was a problem with my copy, so I went online and looked at a copy there to see if it was just mine, but no, it was just really, really bad sound design. I mean, how did they fuck it up so bad? I mean, listen to this.
Often only mother. When he met your sister, he was touched by her and aroused by her. He wanted her. This set off his jealous mother.
How is this even accepted professionally? The sound effects are so out of place and random, it just really, really frustrated me. It really doesn't work, and it actually stops you from hearing the characters at one point. I can't be the only one that thinks this. So what we can see is remaking a film shot for shot, very similar lengths, similar takes, and so on. There's something else that makes a film, a unique to that own film. This is the original Psycho film with every ounce of passion and greatness and suspense ripped the fuck out of it. It just made me want to watch the original. I really just couldn't wait until it was over. I mean, I didn't even laugh when I seen Vince Vaughn dressed up as his mother. I mean, I was just so exhausted at that point. Fuck this movie, seriously, that's it, I'm done. I've said my bit, I'm getting out of here. Thanks for watching everybody, I'll see you in the next video.